Hi, I'm John Emmett, author of Train to Win. In this guide, we're going to be showing you the exercises to make you the best sailors you possibly can be. So with all the exercises, it's really important to understand what we're trying to achieve. So we're going to have very clear aims. This applies for young sailors who are doing the exercises for the first time, up to people who are very proficient. The idea is to continue to push yourself to make the exercises harder so that you're always going to be improving as much as you possibly can.
I've been here in the superb Vang Hung Sailing Centre training the racing coaches to help the young sailors improve all their racing skills. This centre is based in Longshire in Shenzhen, and this is now a major championship venue and will be hosting both the Topper and FIFA World Championships. The best preparation for international events is to train at the championship venue. One of the best ways of improving your sailing is to work on your cardiovascular fitness. This means doing activities that get you out of breath and work your heart and your lungs. My favourite activity for this is cycling.
So sailing is a sport. And this means physical fitness is a really important part of your training. One of the best ways to get fit for sailing, especially hiking boats, is cycling. This works the front of your legs, but also, if you have clip-in pedals, the back of your legs, in a very kind way to your body, because it's much lower impact than running. Now, of course, you can train indoors on a stationary bike, but this is much more fun. You can go touring around the regatta venues, you can use it as a means of transportation, and you also have the balancing element which you don't have with a stationary bike. So I would advise people, if possible, to make cycling part of their training program.
One of the most time-efficient ways of gaining aerobic fitness is, of course, running. All you need is a good pair of trainers, and you can start training as soon as you step out of your front door. You can also monitor the training with a heart rate monitor to make sure you're at the right intensity. Afterwards, you need to do a good stretch and also work your core. So after any training exercise, whether you're running, cycling or sailing, you need to do a good cool down and stretch. Sailing is actually a hard sport on the body, and especially the back and neck, which is why we need to make sure that it's mobile through doing flexion exercises, extension exercises, and working the core. The stronger the core is, the better supported your back will be, and this means there's much smaller chance of injury. In this video, we are just showing a few basic stretches, but you would want to hold these stretches for at least 30 seconds. And the core, you will be working each exercise for around 2 minutes. Lastly, don't forget, you also must stretch your neck. Your head weighs about 1/6 of your body weight, and when you're hiking with your upper body flat out the boat, there's an awful lot of weight put through your neck. If you look after your body will look after you.
So after a good training session, recovery is very important. This means a cool down, a stretch, and to refuel the body. So I'm rehydrating. And also putting in what I've lost. This is my favourite recovery drink. It has a very good ratio of carbohydrate to proteins, so that's a 2-to-1 ratio. Lots of good products on the market, but I get on well with this one. And it's going to give me the energy to do a good training session tomorrow. And by refueling immediately, I will actually be able to refuel better. So taking it in a liquid form is going to be faster digestion. It's also going to be easier to consume. Careful now. Because if you're tired, maybe you don't want to sit down for a full meal, but it's very easy to drink a recovery shake. And of course, one of the most important things, since you may be doing this every day, is you enjoy the flavour. So I'm now going to connect my watch to my computer so I can analyse the data. This is very simple. I'll remove my watch. I have a connection here. This is connected to a USB port. Line it up. And off we go. On the map and the heart rate, the little stops, or rather slowing of heart rate, is corresponding with stopping at traffic lights. You see the peak heart rate is when crossing the bridge over to the Key of Biscay, and a relatively steady state with a slight drop at the turning points. So this was a lower intensity session, 143 beats per minute average, but a longer session of just under 2 hours, and that was 1,387 calories. So this is all recorded, and I can use this as a basis to ensure I don't over or under train. One of the most important parts of any race is the start. A really bad start could mean a disqualification or make it almost impossible to get a good result. This is why practicing starting is so important. And in this section, we will give you the exercises to improve your starting technique.
So before we even go on the water, we need to know what we're trying to achieve. Starting has a major impact on our finishing position, and therefore it's something we need to devote a huge amount of practice to. For example, if you only race once a week, you may only do one start a week. So training is the opportunity to perfect your starts. I would recommend a ratio of 3 starts to 1 race, and we need to do different exercise to try and learn different points for starting. For example, holding on the line. This is a boat handling skill and is necessary at all major championships. So if, for example, you're going to a World Championships, you need to be able to line up and hold your position without drifting back, drifting sideways into another boat, or drifting slowly over the line and being scored an OCS. Now, where you start will depend which side of the course is favoured. Often people will have a favoured side of the course, but you need to be able to start at the pin end, at the starboard end, or even in the centre of the line. One of my favourite exercises for this is where the coach boat sits in the middle of the line, and sailors are forced to start by the pin end or by the starboard end. Actually, the goal here is to start as close as possible to the buoy rather than whatever is the favoured end. Starting in the middle of the line can actually be quite difficult. You need a good transit, and it is hard to guess exactly where the midline is. This exercise needs to be done one at a time. When you think you're on the line, you put your hand up and then the coach can tell you where you are. Another skill you may need is the ability to start on port tack, either because you had a poor start or because you want to go right and you want to minimise the number of tacks. So we've already said the ratio of starting practice to racing practice needs to be quite high. So here we have 3 starts, and then straight after the start the sailors come back to the line. We want to maximise the benefit we get from any training session. So I would recommend a rolling sequence. 3, 2, 1, go. And then the go is actually the 3 minute for the next start. This means we can do 3 starts and a race underway in less than 10 minutes. Here we can see the boats holding position near the starboard end, and it's all about the acceleration. Another good exercise for this is the variable start, and that is 3 minutes, 2 minute, 1 minute, and the start can go early or the start can go late. And this means sailors need to sit on the line, or rather near the line, and be good at accelerating. The key skill of accelerating can be practiced without the need for any line, where 2 or 3 boats line up and the middle boat would shout 3, 2, 1, go, and you just practice going from stationary to full speed. Having done a few starts, it's always good to have the racing practice to keep those skills sharp, and we would be looking at having a short course because the theme of this session is very much about boat handling. The key thing is to train as you race and race as you train. This means the racing rules apply. You touch your mark, you take a penalty. You infringe your boat, you take a penalty. And you sail as hard and as fast as you would do if you're in a World Championship. The race is never over until you cross the finish line, and you need to get into good habits. That means maximum effort in medium to strong winds and maximum concentration in light winds. It's amazing when you get to the end of the championships, just 2 or 3 points less can make a huge difference to the overall result. Here, with short course racing, we can do many races in a day. One of the other exercises that I like for starting is the box exercise, as it's very easy for sailors to get too far away from the start line. Here, you don't only have the start line, but you have a buoy directly downwind of both the pin and a committee boat end. If sailors go outside, then they have to perform a penalty turn.
A good race means a good first beat, and here upwind boat speed is very important. The idea being to be as fast, or if not faster than your rivals, in a variety of wind conditions. Here we will give you the training exercises to improve your upwind boat speed.
One of the best ways of starting the upwind exercise is with a rabbit start. Here, the rabbit comes across, in this case on starboard, and the other boats cross behind. This means after the rabbit tacks, if they do a good tack, everybody should be level upwind. It's also a good exercise for practicing crossing behind people in a real race. The key thing with the rabbit is they have to be on a close wall course, as well as doing a good tack, and the other boats need to sit still waiting for the rabbit to come. Now, after the rabbit start or gate start, boats can focus on their racing. It's good to practice doing long upwinds so that you get the muscle memory on one tack, because the conditions will mean a big difference in the correct boat balance and boat trim. So here, in the very light winds, we need to have the boat trim well forward. That means both the crew and the helm are going to sit as far forward as possible. As the wind increases, both the crew and the helm will be moving up to windward and also back. So as you approach hiking conditions, the helm will be sitting behind the crew who is by the shroud. It's the same in a single-hander, like the topper. In the light winds and in non-hiking, you're as far forward in the boat as you can comfortably go. In the topper, this often means sitting on the centreboard so the boat stays flat. Once hiking, you're moving back because you're using the center toe strap, which is located behind the daggerboard. In light winds, it often feels like upwind there's very little difference in boat speed, but by the windward mark you would be surprised. One of the most important things in the light winds is to keep your wind clear. Here we have the toppers starting the upwind on a follow my leader. It's important not only to have the boats equal amount upwind when they start, so here they're starting on a beam reach, but to have enough space between the boats for when they head up. In light winds, to keep speed between upwind legs, we need to do aggressive roll tacks, and this is covered in another section. When racing, we need to think about our upwind speed, boat handling and tactics. In this example, the boat on the right will have made a gain because they were in more favourable current conditions. In light winds, it's also important to keep the cockpit free of water. In stronger winds, when you are hiking, you can open the self-bailer on the topper located on the starboard side. So, when hiking and with the boat flat, the boat will drain from water freely. It's important in medium winds to be dynamic, which means moving in the lulls and out in the gusts. You can also change your angle to keep hiking. So if you foot or sail low, you can keep hiking in the lulls, and in the gusts you can head up a little bit to keep the boat flat and take you on a shorter route to the windward mark. Of course, sailing upwind you want to minimise the distance. This means you need to watch out for ley lines. In other words, don't get too focused on your speed and forget what's the best course. Once rounding the windward mark, you need to get the rig set up for the next leg, whether that is a reach or a run.
The sail shape is really important, especially when we're going upwind. This is why we have the telltales. You don't have them right at the front of the mast, because if they were right at the front of the mast, they would never fly. If you had the telltales a long way back, then actually they would always fly and they wouldn't give you such useful information. The most important thing in a topper is we need to keep the centre of effort back in the sail so that we see we have the water is around the same position as the centreboard. If the water ended up a long way back behind the centreboard, then the boat would always want to go head to wind. And this is the problem we have if we try and sail upwind when it's very windy. If we have lots and lots of kicker and a very tight leach, the boat is always wanting to go head to wind. So the most important sail control in the upper wind range, if you're struggling to bear away, is the Cunningham. And you can see with the Cunningham, when it's on tight with no wind, you have this vertical crease. You wouldn't have that if it was really windy, because the power of the wind would blow that crease out. And I say the outhaul is really just affecting the bottom third of the sail. If you look at the very top of the sail, you won't actually see very much difference at all as I adjust the outhaul. Need to look after your ropes, because any rope that goes through a block or a cleat will wear out. You need to take good care of that. And I would always have as thinner ropes as possible, but maybe you have a nice handle where your hand goes. You might not all have hands as tough as I do. And just be careful, as I say, where the rope goes through the blocks. You can see the rope wears out, and you need to make sure you keep this rope in good order and repair it before it breaks. The last point is the ropes need to be low stretch so that the sail shape stays when you tighten the sail controls. So these tend to be hard ropes as opposed to the main sheet, which is a softer rope because you're holding it in your hands the whole time. So there we go. Good boat handling is absolutely essential, and tacking is a very important skill. It gives you the tactical options to go where you want on the race course, and we're going to help you improve your tacking, whether it's from light winds to survival conditions.
Proper preparation promotes perfect performance. This means we need a good plan. In the old days, before GPS and satellite navigation systems, we used to have maps, and this means when undertaking any journey, we will be very sensible to look at the map before we step outside our front door. This is very true of sailing. Before we take to the water, we need to have a plan. And this means a clear briefing given by the coaches, maybe using a whiteboard or flip chart. And the sailors have to take responsibility and ask questions if they don't understand. We need to know what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how we're doing it. And when everybody is clear of what our aims and objectives are, it's time to go on the water. So we rig the boats, double check that there's not going to be any issues with the rig and rigging, and we go afloat. Once on the water, we need to make the very best use of our time. One of the most important skills, and this is for beginners to Olympic champions, is the ability to tack well. Of course, there's lots of ways of doing this, and we could simply go out and just practice tacking on our own. But being in a group situation is much more useful. If we practice tacking on the whistle, it gives us an opportunity to compare our tacks to other sailors as well as the coaches the opportunity to video the tacks and to look for any differences. Here we start the exercise by lining everyone up using a simple follow my leader. The lead boat is chasing the rib and the other boats are chasing the one in front. On the first whistle, boats will head up, and on each subsequent whistle they will tack. Probably my favourite exercise is the riverbank exercise, because this combines the need to tack, to stay within the imaginary river formed by the three ribs, but also it's boat-to-boat tactics, port and starboard, you have water for the riverbank, and you need to tack on the shifts. Those who do a good job will be rewarded by the opportunity to round the committee boat when they extend away from their rivals. Here we can do lots of tacks in a day, and therefore we have a large chance to improve our sailing. It's also an exercise that the sailors really enjoy because they can monitor their progress. The follow my leader is a great way of getting the group all together, and we can start the exercises as quickly as possible. Natural progression is an important thing. With boat speed, this is sometimes just a case of doing longer exercises to build strength and muscle memory. With boat handling, it's about doing more in a smaller period of time. Here, we're going into a double tack, which is done on the whistle, but there's no reason why you couldn't do 3, 4, 5 or even 6 tacks in a row. Here it's all about crew work, especially in the light winds, where there's a lot of roll required in the boat. The other way of forcing more tacks is to have a short course racing, or even to have a number of tacks and jibes that must be completed on each leg of the course. After this leads on nicely to the gut buster exercise. Please note these courses can be done in light winds or strong winds. With slow boats or fast boats, you just need to lengthen the course to be appropriate. The learning doesn't stop on the water. A good debrief is absolutely vital to understand and draw conclusions from what we've learned on the water. It's also another opportunity for the sailors to ask the coaches questions and for the coaches to explain. Video debrief can be really useful here because it allows the sailors to see exactly what the coaches saw, and good technique can be kept and recorded to look at for future occasions.
Most regattas now will feature a downwind finish so that the fleet is close to the starting line in order to start the next race. This means a race is never over until it's over, and downwind speed is becoming more and more important.
So, looking at downwind now, it's important that everybody's lined up an equal distance downwind. A good way of doing this is to start with follow my leader. My preference here is to do a tack, then a bear away, because this is a difficult boat handling manoeuvre and therefore is worth practicing. The harder things are which you practice in training, the easier you will find it when you're really racing. The good thing about this exercise is it keeps all the boats really close together. And that's exactly what it's like on a high level racetrack. so you need to learn to sail fast with other boats around you. You're not allowed to jibe, you have to stay on the same tack, so you need to find your lane. This means optimising your speed and trying to be in a clear lane that's not getting dirty wind from the boats behind you. Toppers are a good example of a boat that can sail large angles without the need to jibe, whereas if you've got a spinnaker, you need to sail a higher angle downwind to get the spinnaker or kite to fly. We expect to see a very big difference in boat speed between a boat whose spinnaker is flying well and one who is struggling. Only when the wind is very, very light would you not fly a spinnaker, and in these conditions you would probably expect not to race. The key thing with the spinnaker boats is to look for the pressure, because you can sail across the race course to get to it. And that means you need to choose your tack carefully when sailing downwind. So, just like upwind, where you're choosing the tack which takes you closest to the mark, which is a lifting tack, downwind you're looking to be on headed tack, the tack that's going to take you to the gate or leeward mark as quickly as possible. You can see clean air is very important, because when a boat gets covered, if the spinnaker collapses, that's a large drop in boat speed. Boat speed is a combination of how fast the boat is going and actually how close it goes to the next mark. So the deeper you go, the shorter the distance you sail to the downwind marks, but the slower you go. So the tendency is in light winds for boats to sail quite deep. When we're into medium winds, they will go higher because you can get a large increase in speed. And when the wind strength really increases, we tend to go lower again because the boats are overpowered. This is very different to a topper, which will tend to sail the same angles regardless of the wind strength. And the toppers will go nearly directly downwind. Therefore, rather than jibing, they will consider sailing by the lee. In this example, the flow of wind is going from the leach of the sail to the luff. This is actually very stable, as it means the mast is now acting as the leach. This also means the boat can turn a lot downwind to find the best route through the waves. This is one of the advantages in having unstayed rig.
The ability to cover your rivals is not only a skill which is important for match racing and team racing, also it can be important in fleet racing, where you have to slow down a rival or simply stay between them and the next mark of the course. Here we're going to be looking at how best to control your rival.
Of course, in close racing, you're going to have lots of interactions with other boats. One of the most important things to understand is the direction the wind is coming from, and accurate wind awareness. In these scenarios here, we're looking at boats covering each other. So the position to maximise the coverage is directly upwind. Here, you may be trying to slow a rival down because it's just between you and them for a place in a competition. Indeed, at many recent Olympic Games, the gold medal has been decided in a match race. In this situation, the lead boat is matching the second boat tack for tack, trying their very best to stay directly upwind of them and between them and the next mark. Of course, you wouldn't necessarily do this in a real race, because this is something that's only likely to be happen if you're challenging for the front of a championship. But it's a very useful exercise to practice, and tacking is a very important skill. The windier it is, the faster the tacks need to be, and the aim of the second boat is to try and escape. By throwing in lots of tacks, or maybe trying to do dummy tacks, you can break away into clean air. So in this situation, your boat speed is not affected. Remember, the more tacks you do, even if you do very good tacks, you're likely to be slowed down. So in this scenario, the boat has managed to escape a little bit, but is still being loose covered. So they have clean air, but the other boat is still in control. This way they are making good progress to the next mark, but they may not be able to choose which side they wish to go. The timing of the tack is very important. So you may decide that actually you want to loose cover rather than tight cover. However, for a tight cover, you actually need to start to tack at the same time they do, because to complete a tack may take 2 or 3 seconds. In light winds you need lots of roll, and this means a lot of coordination between the helm and the crew. To escape from your rivals, you want to be able to tack without them realising you're going to do so. Now, when we go downwind, the shoe is on the other foot. The boat behind is now covering the boat ahead. Once again, we need to think very carefully about the angle. So for maximum cover, we're needing to position ourselves directly downwind. So just like the tacking, where we did it tack for tack, downwind we're doing jibe for jibe. And the closer the gap, the more dirty air you can give your opponent.
Many of the place changes in a race are going to occur at marks. This is why the ability to do a good mark rounding is so important. We're going to be looking at the skills involved with doing good mark roundings regardless of the conditions.
Many of the place changes during a race will occur at marks. Certainly, in terms of the racing rules and protests, marks can be a hot spot because it brings boats together. One of my favourite exercises is the gut buster, where there is a turning mark in the centre of the course that the boats have to go around, both on the upwind and downwind leg. You need to remember that the windier it is, the less time you're going to have to make these important decisions. And you also need to think about the rules. For example, a port tack approach to a port rounding windward mark can be very dangerous in a tightly packed fleet. Downwind, we will normally have a gate. This is common in large fleet races as it separates the fleet and means you need to make a good decision about which gate to go around. The thing with the gut buster is it forces you to do far more difficult boat handling manoeuvres than you would do in a real race. So if you practice these sort of exercises, which are really difficult, so you're trying to do a tight circle and maintain speed, you will find it easier when you're actually racing. If possible, using the spinnakers. What we can do is make the race course longer or shorter to match the ability of the sailors. A shorter course is much harder. To match the wind, because obviously as the wind speed increases, boats will go faster. And of course the boat type. Higher performance boats will go much faster. But the key thing here is to improve our boat handling. So we will be looking at trying to do hoist and drops, perhaps when we wouldn't normally do so, and to do a tighter circle as possible whilst carrying the spinnaker. Normally when we're racing we will be thinking about lots of things, such as clean wind and the favoured tack, both up and downwind, and we still need to practice this when we're doing our mark roundings. So for example, the gate is not going to be equal in a perfect world because the wind is not going to stay in a constant direction. So whilst sailing downwind, you need to make a decision which mark you will go to. One of the other ways to make the exercise more difficult is to have a very short start line, making it difficult for boats to cross. This means you need to line up early to get your place. To make the exercise more difficult, you can also add tacks, a minimum number of tacks upwind. That's between the start line and the gutbuster mark, and between the gutbuster mark and the windward mark. And we can also add jibes on the downwind leg. Anything to make the exercise more difficult, as long as it's achievable, is going to make it more worthwhile. Why not try starboard roundings? This is useful because it's something you don't practice very often, and if sailors are going to do match racing or team racing, it's very useful. So the closer the boats are together, the more difficult it is. This also means sailors will have to tack and jibe far more than they would do in a normal race. So practice makes perfect. This is an example of a dynamic exercise where sailors are having to think for themselves rather than simply tacking or jibing on the whistle. Toppers are ideal boat for this because there is a small amount of boat-to-boat contact. It's not going to end up with damage. But again, a gentle reminder, normal racing rules will apply. So sailing is a non-contact sport. We don't hit other boats, we don't hit other marks, and if we make a mistake, then we need to take a penalty, which is a 360-degree turn if we touch a buoy, or 720 if we infringe another boat. So go out, challenge yourself, enjoy.
With many championships now featuring inner and outer loop course, so they can have several fleets racing at the same time, the ability to reach fast is more important than ever. And it's also a lot of fun being able to reach fast. In sailing, we really don't want to have any weaknesses in our abilities. Reaching is still part of club and even championship races, and you may end up reaching sometimes if a leg hasn't been correctly set. Therefore, we definitely need to be practicing reaching like all the other sailing skills. Reaching is also a very good way to start exercises, whether they're going upwind or downwind. The bear away is also very important from a reach. Here we've borne away to go dead downwind, and we can change the angle that we reach at. So the broader the angle, the more similar it is to dead downwind, and the tighter the angle, the more similar it is to beating. And this corresponds with every aspect: the rig setup, the crew positioning, and of course the sheeting. When you're reaching, you're likely to be doing multiple mark roundings, and this is very important, especially if you're going to an upwind leg, to make sure that you have clean wind.
In club racing, often the local topography will mean you need to zigzag downwind. One of my favourite exercises for this is chase the coach boat, because not only does it look at boat speed, but it encourages you to get your head out of the boat and look at the next leg of the course. Here, boats can be deliberately kept very close together, fighting for clean air, just like you would do upwind. So, this is very applicable to racing. The key thing here is for sailors to be thinking as they round the boat multiple times, and you can do lots of legs on the way back to the sailing club. There's an advantage to do short legs because it keeps the boats together and allows more mark roundings, and the advantage to longer legs is, just like sailing upwind, you develop the muscle memory and of course the feel. So the coach boat can go a short distance or a long distance for whatever is the particular need for the sailors. The key thing is to try and make sure each training session has a long focus so people really remember the skills. Keeping the boats tightly packed together makes it feel as much as possible like a real race. Just remember, the conditions and the ability of the sailors do need to be appropriate for the exercise. Or maybe you will want to sail high, for example, if there's gusts coming down the racecourse and you want to get to them first. In the absence of any of this, of course, the quickest way to the coach boat is a straight line. But this is rarely the case, because there's always going to be other factors influencing your sailing, not the least the other boats and what they decide to do. This is why in a real race, the leaders often get a long way clear of the chasing pack because they have the opportunity to sail where they want, rather than doing a big arc on the way to the next mark. These reaching exercises are one of my favourite ways to finish the day, because after doing several reach to coach boat, you can do a reach to the slipway and home.
Downwind, we're still going to see changes in wind direction and wind speed. So just like upwind, where we're tacking on the pressure and the shift, downwind we need to jibe to sail the best possible course. And this means being able to do good jibes is also very important. Here we're going to show you some of the best exercises for improving your jibing techniques.
Practicing jibing with single-handers is very much the same as with 2 or 3 man boats. Here we need to consider the angle of turn very carefully, whether we're jibing run to run, run to reach, reach to reach, or reach to run, because we want to ensure that the sail is set correctly at the exit of the turn. This may mean we would adjust the rig before we go into the manoeuvre. We want to have a precise turn going through exactly the correct angle so as to be set for the next leg of the course. We may of course need to time this with the waves, especially in large wave conditions, and even in short chop we may need to adjust our trim for a good turn. We will also need to consider other boats around us. A downwind start is always a good way to start this exercise, It encourages the sailors to think about timing and the racing rules. Once the race has started, you can clearly see the advantage to be gained by having good jibing technique. The key thing is to jibe without sailing extra distance, and you can see here how the boats who are jibing well will soon pull ahead. You also, as soon as you've completed your jibe, need to be focusing on your downwind boat speed. Lastly, like in any race, you do need to look behind and make sure that you continue to keep your air clear.
Well, I've been John Emmett. I hope you've really enjoyed this, the Train to Win guide. And remember, whether you're preparing for your first ever club race or for a major championship, the more you practice, the better your result is likely to be. So wishing you lots of luck in your sailing season, work hard and have fun.